Hello, welcome to my channel. This particular video is a series of videos that I'm doing on safe locations for the United States, state by state. Tonight I'm covering Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi as kind of a group, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida as kind of a group, South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina. I want to comment on the Gulf states and the East Coast states here in the South, in that if you're thinking of relocating in high land in these areas, you'll see this is the pole melt here. So obviously you can't settle or weather out the pole. Well, you can weather out the pole shift in here. I'll get to that in a sec. But for if you want to weather out the pole shift, say in these areas, some areas, you could, but you're going to have to move anyways because the pole melt is going to take out this area. Now it's going to be higher in the east because the East Coast loses, in the end, it loses after all the dust settles, as it were. It loses 150 more feet, but the timing is such that prior to the pole shift, the East Coast is pulled down more than 150 feet. But I go into that in the video. So there's no sense, in my opinion, of weathering out the pole shift in an area you're going to have to move from anyways. So, but the timing is very crucial. So the day before the pole shift, this is what this area is going to look like. When the pole shift happens, you're going to have the pole shift waves. So now this is 1,000 feet. So this is just a guess. To give you an idea, but you're going to have, now obviously the pole shift waves aren't going to push up into the Great Lakes but this the idea is to give you an idea of the height of the wash of the pole shift waves. So I go into state by state, but so, and then a few weeks later, after the pole shift, what you're going to be back to is essentially more or less the old coastlines, but everything's destroyed through here because of the pole shift waves. So obviously you're going to have pools of seawater in areas that haven't quite drained yet. Certainly in the west coast is going to be seawater draining in possibly, they say, for many months in the aft time, maybe even longer. But so and then but if we were to back up and you could consider the fact that you have the late in the sequence of the events that must occur before the pole shift have to occur, are all these events here all laid out by Zeta Talk that must occur. That's why I'm telling people it's not, the pole shift is years, we have years to go yet, 2023, and I explained that in one of my videos. But the New Madrid event is late in the sequence. But so then you have to suffer this New Madrid event in these Gulf states first, and then and even before that you have the Caribbean plate washing up into the Gulf. So you've got problems in the Gulf even in 2021 of flooding in here. So and then so then you got after the flooding from the Caribbean plate being pushed into the Louisiana and Texas, the states here, Then you've got to deal with the after that, probably 8 months or so after that, which I think will be about 2022-ish. You have the New Madrid breaking all the dams and all the roads, and the army's going to move in, and FEMA's going to move in, and there's going to be checkpoints, and there's going to be they're going to be there's just going to be a lot of government action in these areas, restricting the movements of people, and so you have to look at that, and then you've got the lead up to the pole shift. Then you've got the big pole shift waves coming in and taking everything out, and then they recede, and then 2 years, about 2025, you've got the pole melt come in slowly. So survival in these states is just virtually impossible unless you're on these dryland areas, which I go into in each state by state. So I just want to give you that quick overview on the difficulties of the lower state. Now the states. Now there is some good news for Arkansas, but let's take a look at Arkansas then. This is USA. Arkansas is right in the middle of the action, so we're going to break this down a little bit. The thing about Arkansas is that if you zoom into this map here, okay, gotta zoom in a little farther in, so you can see Arkansas. Well, it's hard. The boundaries aren't on the map here, but you can see this is Arkansas right there. So you've got this dividing line right there between the blue and the purple, and the taupe and the yellow. This is young rock. All this is all young rock, relatively young, and the blue and purple is relatively old. As you can see, it runs up into the Ozarks, and it runs up into Wisconsin and all here. So this is all nice, solid, old rock. This rock is called the Canadian Shield, and it's a craton in its own right, and it's the oldest rock. But this blue and purple is the next oldest, probably about 1 billion years old. So good, solid land. So Arkansas basically is diagonally split between low young rock and rock that is old. So for after time survival, the blue and purple is much better because it doesn't split and separate and the way the young stuff does. So it will hold, the ground will hold in the 100 years of aftershocks that are going to happen after the New Madrid. After the pole shift. Speaking of the New Madrid, we're right in zone with these states here. So you can see we've got Arkansas here, and up here we've got the other state of Missouri. But so New Madrid is right in here. So, but right now we're just talking about rock. So for after time living, the northwestern, if you imagine Arkansas being split, here's a good example here. So this area here along that bluff and northwest of this of this bluff is all stable old rock. Now, as it happens, half of Arkansas, that zone here, along here, like that, is going to be under the waves in the about 2025. So you're going to have, well, this is what you should use as a guide, is this portion of Arkansas, right? Those two sections right there. Now, so any discussion of life in the aftertime in Arkansas, in this section here, the south eastern side and the southern portion, is moot because it's going to be underwater in the new Mississippi Gulf anyways. But as far as the actual the pole shift event, well, that goes to the pole shift event. Because you're going to have waves washing up that far anyways from the Gulf. So you don't want to be in this lowland during the pole shift anyways. But the thing about your survival location, unless you have plans to migrate back to your homeland in certain states after the pole shift and after the pole melt, that's another story. But in my opinion, there's no sense migrating back to this area because it's going to be under the waves in the new Gulf anyways. So your survival location for Arkansas would be these two sections of land, because you're not moving back to Pine Bluff. So now there is another issue with Arkansas in that we have a nuclear station in here on the Arkansas River here. So now that's going to be flooded over anyways, but it does mean that unless they seal it or something, seal the I don't think it's going to happen. So the problem with this area in here is that you may have a fair amount of radiation in the water in the aftertime. So I'm suggesting to avoid the Arkansas River area in here, at this whole section here, these two seashores here. So for the aftertime. So my suggestion would be to settle on the southern portions of these mountains in Arkansas here, center, and do your fishing here. Well, you're going to be doing your fishing here, right? So obviously you're going to want a boat or two and all the stuff that goes with repairing it. Now the same goes for the northwestern section of Arkansas. I'm recommending that you don't do any fishing on the south coast of this area. So you're going to do your fishing over on the extreme east. Now that won't be east. That won't be east in the aftertime. What it will be, that'll be the new north. So that will swing up and become north. So you're going to do your fishing on the north side. So in here. So we have so the great thing about Arkansas is that you don't have to go very far to get terrific high land and stable land for your aftertime living. So that's the really good news. The bad news is the radiation from that nuclear station, so stay away from this inlet. And that's same with Oklahomans. I didn't see that. That's the benefit of looking at the whole areas at once. So for Oklahoma, want to, unfortunately, you don't want to be fishing in this area here. You want to be fishing down here. So if you're going to have to memorize that, Oklahomans are going to have to remember that the new northeast coast here is the place to fish for Oklahomans. So now let's move ahead to the New Madrid. New Madrid event is taking place, strictly speaking, within Arkansas and parts of, forgive me, parts of parts of Missouri. So, parts of, where was I? So the New Madrid fault line proper is right in here between, whoa, my memory, Missouri, so the New Madrid fault line is right in this area here, between Arkansas and, well, this whole, all these states right there. So it's going to involve directly Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee. I had no idea Tennessee was that shape. And Illinois, southern Illinois, and western Kentucky. So this means that people in these states absolutely have to prepare for the pole shift a year ahead of time. As I said, I believe the New Madrid will happen about a year or so, maybe only a few months before the actual pole shift, because, as I said before, we're going to go back to that map, to discussion of this map here. So it's late in the series. So there's a lot going on in this series. So it's late in the series. So it looks to me, my best guess would be about between 8 to 6 months or so before the actual pole shift event. That would put it at about 2022, sometime in 2022. So you've got a serious situation here happening about 2022. That means residents in this area will need to prepare for the pole shift at least a year before everyone else. So what will happen is, I keep saying this, but the Mississippi is, all the bridges on the Mississippi are going to go. All the bridges, all the way up. Because what's going to happen is that this section of the eastern seaboard, all the way up to New York, Vermont, Maine, that whole piece is going to shift down. Now, I don't know how far. Probably a few miles anyways. But it doesn't matter. It's going to shift, bang. And now we know the pressure's building. Zeta talks about the pressure building. We know there's earthquakes happening in here. But at one point, it's just going to snap. And what's going to happen is it's going to isolate all these states from continental U.S. Of course, you're going to have earthquakes throughout the entire eastern seaboard and aftershocks. So broken concrete, disrupted road, broken water pipes, broken gas lines. So if you've got gas, natural gas or propane going on in your house, and you're in a safe area. Let's say you're in a safe area. We'll do these areas coming up. But if you're in a safe area and you want to weather out the pole shift in and around your home, and you want your home to survive into the aftertime, then I would disconnect all the gas and cap it off before the New Madrid, frankly, and most certainly before the pole shift. So there you go. I think that's an excellent idea. So you're going to be isolated, and then of course the U.S. government is not going to be able to supply all these people with disaster resistance. It's going to trickle and trickle, and then the pole shift is going to get closer. The second sun's going to be up there, visible. A lot of people are going to ask questions. There's going to be rioting. It's going to be a big mess. So that's why I keep harping. If you live in the eastern seaboard, and most especially in these states here, prepare for the pole shift 1 year at least ahead of time, so that when New Madrid hits, you can live off your supplies, what have you. You can continue to live and eke out existence. Maybe if you're lucky, your job will still be going, but to continue to earn money to pay for things, but be prepared beforehand. So Arkansas, the great news is that you have a place to go for the aftertime, right in your own state, and it's in these mountains here. So and the nuclear station, and of course during the pole shift itself, you're going to have massive flooding through here. It's going to be completely flooded. So because you're so close to the Gulf, and so that's what's going to happen in this area. Completely do not be in this area. So Zeta Talk says that I know there's 3 million people in Arkansas. I also know that there's 15 million people in Texas. So only this part of Texas to the Balcones is going to be directly affected, intensely affected. So call it half of Texas. So 7 million people. Call it it's not all the way up. So we'll call it about 5 to 6 million people be displaced there. Anyone living in Arkansas in this area was probably at least 2.5 million people. And Mississippi has 3 million as well. Louisiana has about the same, about 3 million. So I would anticipate that 675, that Mississippi people are going to move towards this mountain range here, and all these people here can move that way, and the people in western Mississippi, perhaps Louisiana and Texas. I think the Texans will move that way, but there's going to be some migration into these lands here, and but the Zeta Talk says there won't be as much migration as in other states. So That's the good news about Arkansas. You got terrific highland, and you can go there and live out the rest of your life. Just make sure you're fishing off this coast, and if you're down in here, to fish off this coast. So we've got the run up to the pole shift. We have the New Madrid event covered. So, and we've got the pole shift event covered, and we have the highland for the Apatime covered there. So that's Arkansas. Okay, we're going to look at Louisiana and Mississippi as a group. And the reason for that is that in the Apatime, the entire states of Louisiana and Mississippi are completely flooded over with the pole melt. So that precludes any possibility of weathering out the pole shift in these states. So it means moving out of these states before the pole shift entirely. One could move, you have wonderful land to go to. You've got northern Arkansas, and you've got this section in here. Just want to remind people to not fish in this new Gulf. So you'll have to memorize that, because there's a nuclear station in here that's going to likely contaminate this Gulf. We have 3 nuclear stations in this area here between Mississippi and Louisiana, but they'll be in pretty deep water. Now I want to point something out about the timing involved in your move, because what we have happening is we have a sequence of events that are occurring. India, Philippines go down, and then the Philippine plate. We probably won't hear much about that. But then the South American plate is going to start accelerating its roll. It's going to push down the Caribbean plate, and then it's going to this displacement of the Caribbean plate is going to push a lot of seawater into the Gulf. So you're going to have a massive flood coming in from that event. And this is fairly early on in the sequence. I'm guessing at about sometime in late 2021 or 2022, you're going to have a push of water into, and it's going to directly hit Louisiana and Mississippi and the Gulf states here. We'll talk about Florida in a bit. Same thing is going to be for Florida. But so note that then you've got other events occurring, and likely will be in the news, because it's understood that the internet will be functioning right up until the weeks before the pole shift, perhaps even during or just before. But anyways, and then you've got the Mediterranean happening here, and you have the Japan quakes. So then you've got the New Madrid going on. So for people in this area here, especially on the coasts of the Gulf, first you've got the massive wave coming in from this event, and then months later you have the New Madrid happening. So you've got these two events happening before the pole shift itself. So because of that, these states should probably, and especially anyone living on the coasts, should be moving out probably about 2020, 2 years at least before the pole shift, because of the troubles you're going to have in this area. So that's about the timing, and hopefully you'll move out before the new Madrid hits, because when that hits, traveling is not going to be easy, because the roads are going to be broken, and there's going to be bridges broken. Now, I did have a dialogue last year with a woman who was planning on transiting from Texas through this area into the mountains here, these mountains. And we were talking, and she said that she had a dream where she saw in the road leading up to these areas, she was traveling from Texas through, and she mentioned the road that she was traveling on, and she said that she encountered an army checkpoint with a barbed wire across the road. So that was a dream, and that's a very clear dream. That's a super clear dream. So the thing is, anyone who wants to move into these areas here, these highlands, you better do it before the new Madrid happens. And late travel is not going to be a good idea, because you're going to have army checkpoints, and they're going to be controlling the movement of the civilians. So I just wanted to say that, because if you're in these areas and you want to move, don't wait. So that's Louisiana and Mississippi. Okay, now we're going to look at Alabama, Georgia, and Florida as a group. When you look at the pole melt alone, all of Florida, most of Georgia, and most of it Alabama are under the waves. So as in Louisiana and Mississippi, there's no sense in discussing pole shift survival in these states. So it's recommended that if you live in Alabama, Georgia, or Florida, to move. Florida has, as of 2015, had 20 million people. Georgia, Georgia has 500,000 people. Well, that's Atlanta, Georgia. So that city alone has got 500,000 people already in the highlands area. So so you have 20 million people that are going this way through Georgia to Atlanta and into the Appalachians in this area. Alabama, I think, has about 5 million people. So they're all going that way too. Now Alabama does have some highland. You can see it here in the northeastern area of Alabama. Yes, Alabama. You can see it there. But it's the only place in the state that has any high land in it. There's a few hilly areas that'll have that are above what you can see with this flood map, that there are areas in Alabama that are above the flood. Now keep in mind, this is I'm going to back out again, this is the pole melt. This is not the pole wash. The pole wash is way more aggressive, completely opposite that of the pole melt. So it's going to rush into those highlands, and it's going to be going over these hills. So there really isn't any survival at all. Even though it looks like it in those highlands, I wouldn't settle in these areas just on the pole shift rush of the waves alone. And then on top of that, you have 20 million, so 25, 30 million people. Well, a lot of these people will die. So let's call it 5 million people all trying to get into this area here. So this is not recommended at all, Alabama, Georgia, or Florida. The only thing is the reality is that people have to earn money to prepare for them. At least most of us working people have to earn money to prepare, to save, to buy equipment and food, supplies, stuff like that for survival. So there's many ways of looking at it. People can move now because there's no life left in these Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. There's no life left there. So there's no future, that is to say. So if you move to your new area, West Virginia, we haven't got there yet, or up into northern Wisconsin or Minnesota, and start life anew beforehand, then that would be way better. But if you're stuck in a job in these states, then obviously you're going to stay as long as you can to make the money you would need to make. So obviously you want to be out of here before the Caribbean plate comes under pressure, which is I think it's going to be about 2022, somewhere in there. There's going to be other drama going on in these areas. The New Madrid alone, even though that is slated to happen after the Caribbean island, rather the Caribbean plate press down, the New Madrid is really going to run from the Gulf of St. Lawrence all the way through down right into Mexico. So it's going to affect a very large area. The only tiny little, not even call it a bright spot for Florida, is that according to Zeta Talk, it won't be affected by the New Madrid. If for some reason you have to stay as long as possible in Florida, you're good for New Madrid. So that's just a year before the pole shift. So there's a possibility that if you're not near the sea, you're central Florida. Now I'm not talking about pole shift or anything like that. I'm talking about the year before the pole shift. If you have to work there, potentially possible to stay, earn your money right up to the New Madrid or thereafter, and then make your move to Highland after that. So that's just Florida we're talking. We're not talking Georgia or Alabama. I'm just talking about Florida for that. So these others will be affected by the shock wave and this and that from the New Madrid. So now the thing is, if you're in Florida, it's 2022. New Madrid just completed. There's broken roads everywhere. No bridges are up. Well, you can't expect the bridges to be all intact. So you expect closed bridges, closed roads. So the way out by road is going to be very difficult if you wait that long. Plus, there's always a possibility that the military will be putting up roadblocks. And they won't care. They don't care that the pole shift coming. They put up a roadblock, and that's it. You don't get through. So You may be able to fly out, but for the average person, it's Alabama, Georgia, and Florida is really a 0 for the pole shift and a 0 for aftertime survival. That's Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Okay, we're going to look at Tennessee and South Carolina. Let's first look at South Carolina. South Carolina has the same problem Georgia has. You have, well, almost. You have some highland to the northwest. Some highland. But it's not going to be enough, because during the pole shift, or let's just say just prior to the pole shift, you've got a series of pre-pole shift events that the latest of them, which is number 10, which is this splitting of the mid-Atlantic ridge. What that's going to do is as the Atlantic spreads, what happens is that the continental support for the plates, the North American plate on its eastern edge here, and the same of course for the Eurasian plate and for the African plate, but right now we're just talking about the North American plate, east coast of continental US, is that this area here has to drop because the continental support is dropping. So this is pre-pole shift. New Madrid has already taken place. See, there's already shocks all the way from Mexico to from St. Lawrence to Mexico, isolated this whole eastern seaboard with massive earthquake all along in here. So you've already dealt with that, and hopefully people in this area have already prepared themselves for the pole shift, and frankly probably should be just moved right to their safe locations prior to the New Madrid. And then along comes this tearing, dropping this side of the plate. So what's going to happen is that you're going to lose this zeta toxis several hundred feet of height on the eastern seaboard. After the pole shift completes, now right now we're just talking about the splitting of the mid-Atlantic ridge prior to the pole shift. You lose several hundred feet, but then after the pole shift itself, perhaps a year later, maybe 8 months, 6 months later after the pole shift, the east coast of North America in the U.S. does go back to, raises up a bit and comes back to about 150-foot loss from where it is now. Now, a year and a half after that, the pole is finished melting, and then you have this blue, dark blue. So the water is going back and forth. You've got New Madrid going on, and you've got dropping of elevation. It's just not a good situation. It's a bad situation in South Carolina, and there's not really enough land here for people to stay in South Carolina and to stay safe, because this is only 125 miles, this distance here. So that's only going to be not even 200. So the South Carolina, as far as pre-pole shift conditions are concerned, gets only moderate survival in the higher parts, the north western portion. But then you've got the waters going back and forth, and you've got New Madrid, and you've got the pole melt, and don't forget, during the pole shift you've got the pole wash of the 8 waves, so it's just not good at all. So I'm calling North South Carolina to be not survivable. And now let's look at Tennessee. Tennessee is survivable. You could set up home in Tennessee and survive the pole shift. But there's a big problem with Tennessee, and it's sociological. What's happening is you got the pole melt, you've got a potential 10%. You've got 2 million people from Florida alone that this is just raw numbers. You've got 2 million people from Florida, and where are they going to go? They're going to go straight up to Tennessee, or up further, but they're going to be going through Tennessee. You've got Georgia with 6 million people, so you're going to have 10%. You're going to have 600,000 of those people, maybe 1.5 million, because they may survive up in here. So you may have about 1 million people. So that makes 3 million people between Georgia and Florida alone heading up into Tennessee for high ground. So these are the subtle things that you just don't notice when you look at a state and look at the ground and stuff like this, and the earthquake history and the rock strata and all this kind of thing, and the flood is you don't notice this, and that's what Zeta Talk is really good for. So they're saying that Tennessee does not have a stable future. My guess, and this is because of the high population of people that are going to move there, so they're going to use up all the the food, and as they say, hunt what's going to happen when they hunt the deer to extinction. So you're going to run out of food, and it's just going to be a war as to who's going to survive. So I think the only reason for that is because of overpopulation and where they're coming from. South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, right? So Tennessee, although it looks like it would be a good place to be, and you can survive the pole shift there because it's far enough from the waves, but for long-term survival into the aftertime, it's not a preferred location. So Tennessee, even though it looks good, is not as good as it looks. Now, the only caveat is that if you live in the mountains of Tennessee and you've got lots of family in a strong community, and you've prepared well ahead of time for strife and for problems with social problems, you have a strong community, then you may be able to dig yourself in. I don't see why a person cannot migrate after the things settle down, cannot migrate back to the ocean and use ocean fishing to survive in Tennessee. But I trust Azeta's outlook on that when it comes to these finer points. In Tennessee, see, you've got, these are nuclear stations. South Carolina's got a lot of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's right in that area there. So that, doesn't bode well for fishing. Doesn't bode well for fishing at all. These stations. Yeah. No. I would say Tennessee, South Carolina are absolutely out for survival, because ocean fishing will not be reliable without using potassium iodide for the rest of your life tablets. So I'm afraid, in my opinion, Tennessee is just not good for long-term survival. So that's Tennessee and South Carolina. Okay, let's look at North Carolina. A quick look at North Carolina with these mountains here looks very good. This is the this is the pole melt, and I've adjusted it to 823 feet because the coastline of the East Coast loses, essentially it loses 150 feet from where it is now. So that plus the pole melt of 675 feet brings the coastline to something like this. Now, there's two big problems to do with North Carolina. The main problem is sociological, is that the mountains of North Carolina are host to the wealthy enclaves, which will be populated with the wealthy and their families in the aftertime. So essentially, when you get extreme wealth and common folk, so I'm going to break it into three basic groups. We have the extremely wealthy living in enclaves with all kinds of food and what have you, electricity and the attitudes that go with it. Then you've got the locals, the common folk, what I would call the common folk, people who've grown up in their families in North Carolina, and they have they have a long history there. Then you have the migrants. So you have quite a collection of different people, all seeking high land, because you've got I did the calculation of between Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, not even talking about Tennessee. You have 33 million people before the pole shift. So now you've got probably 3.5 million migrants from these lands here that are losing, that have lost elevation, and the pole melt has pushed them into the mountains, or they've moved there ahead of time. You've got millions of migrants. You have millions of locals living in the, well, maybe not millions of locals. but maybe 500 or a million locals, and then you've got mixed in there. You've got the extremely wealthy. So you have a very disparate group of people. So whenever you have extreme wealth alongside common folk, you don't have a community. You have a potpourri. You have an emulsion of very different lifestyles, very different attitudes. Now, the thing about the wealthy is that they have people who work for them to ensure their safety. So they are going to be used to make sure that the wealthy maintain their lifestyle. So of course the wealthy have the attitude that they're of entitlement. And I usually don't get into this sociological stuff because I find it repugnant. But the reality is you do have a very high content of the rich in this area, and there's going to be a lot of strife and war and killings, frankly, between for years in the after time until that settles out. So this area is not a preferred area to settle in for migrants or common folk looking for a life. They don't mind working hard, but they don't want to be bothered with people coming by and the wealthy and making demands on, we could just go on and on. So the other problem with North Carolina is that there are power stations here. So you have power stations that run right up to the mountains in there. And that's what I'm concerned about, is these power stations right here, nuclear power stations. So they are just in these areas here. So when the pole melt happens, the pole shift, I'm afraid that fishing will not be recommended in this area. So that makes North Carolina not recommended. Now, as I said before, with Tennessee, highlands of Tennessee, if you see if you're living in this area, an area like that, if you're living in somewhere in the mountains near these lakes, what have you, you have a strong family community. You have thought long and hard about what you need to survive in these areas, and you're locals and you know the area well. You have connections in the community. You have a good relationship with the surrounding small communities, but you have an enclave of your own that has a healthy relationship with the surrounding people. Then and you have the stores, and you have you could fish in this lake, for example. So if you have such a situation, then survival in North Carolina or Tennessee or any reasonable area that has sociological problems, I believe that people can make a great life in these areas. But for common folk who've got maybe $10,000 to spend on, or less, or no money to spend on electrical generators, and, steel buildings, ammunition, food stores, all that kind of thing that you'd need to survive in an area like this, that everyone needs really, but rather you're looking for an area where you could develop relationships with other people and coordinate and work together and pool resources the way a community should work. So for people in that of that ilk, of that wherewithal, are better off not to be in North Carolina. So that's North Carolina. Okay, I'd like to conclude this series of coverage of these difficult states of, well, Arkansas was good news, but Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And I want to conclude with a comment about what I believe about radiation leakage. And I get a lot of comments on the channel and also in my Facebook group and in my website and a few things about people believing that radiation leakage presence in the environment is going to be unlivable. I don't believe that. I wrote an extensive article in my Planet X newsletter issue 2 or 3, I'll get that straight later, 2 or 3, about radiation. Now I made a reference to this before, but I did an extensive study of that subject. And I wrote an article about it. It took me months to write. But essentially, you can live with radiation. We already are living with radiation. And Chernobyl is an example of a level 7 event, which is the worst possible event in humankind can have, is a level 7. And so that event was 1986, but the Russian women moved back into Chernobyl area after they were ushered out in 1986. They just moved back, and they've been living there happily. And so the body can adjust. So a lot of this hype about radiation is hype, is what it is. Now, I'm not saying that radiation is good to live with. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the body can adapt. Now, let's look at the world here. It's 3/5 ocean. 3/5 ocean. So, not only that, but the pole shift, these ice caps are going to melt, and they're going to fill the oceans with 675 additional feet all around the globe with fresh water. So not only that, but the pole shift waves moving from the poles beforehand, when you get rotation stoppage, Earth rotates east to rotates west to east like that. So what's going to happen is when Earth comes to a stop, say that we are the sun. So that's going to be the mid-Atlantic ridge down here, like that, is going to lock on to planet X as it passes by. So Earth comes to a rotation stoppage a few days before the pole shift. When that happens, the bulge, Earth is not really round, it's oval, slightly oval, and it's oval because of all the rotating over the billions of years, but it stops occasionally when the planet X comes by. But anyways, it stops. When it stops rotating, the oceans then want to equalize their level, so they rush to the poles. So you've got the pole rush for the waves. So you've got that just for one example. But during when the pole shift occurs, what happens, Earth moves in an hour as px locks on and comes by. Earth locks on, the core of Earth, moon-sized core, locks on to planet X's magnetic field and turns like that inside, but then the core, the crust follows after. So it takes an hour for Earth to find this attitude. Apparently, as we know, it's going to be about 90 degrees. So when that happens, the crust moves. So the water moves with it. But when the crust comes to a stop like that, when the crust comes to a stop, the oceans keep going. So all around the world, you're going to have 500 to 600 foot waves moving and churning. And it's going to take weeks for that to settle down. So that's going to disperse the radiation throughout the oceans. And don't forget, we have the additional melting poles in the aftertime. So the thing is, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not unsurmountable. Now, also, we have to keep in mind that Earth is not just an isolated little planet in the universe. It has many eyes upon Earth, and there are big plans for Earth. Now I'm moving into other areas here, but Earth has a future, and the future is to be a home for only light-oriented souls. So if you were a member of the spiritual hierarchy and the Earth was your baby, or a family of souls, the billions of souls on Earth, at any rate, if you were responsible for a great number of souls, say you're responsible for different aspects of Earth, but regardless, Earth is your baby. You're looking down on it like that, watching it from above. So are you going to let the Earth be completely contaminated by nuclear radiation? Now we enter into another zone, and that is technology. Humans tend to think that the Earth is the center of the universe. They rarely get beyond the job, because they are working so hard to pay the banks just to have a house. And they flop down, go to sleep, get up, have dinner, watch TV. They got kids. You got to take kids to the park, the dog to the park. You got to crash, sleep all night, get up early, go to work again. So the average person just is so involved in their life, they rarely think beyond their circles. Now, I know there are a lot of people that do that, but the consciousness is like that. So what I'm saying is that there's many more hands going on, many more things going on with Earth than most people realize. And so Earth is managed. So please read my article on nuclear radiation leakage. Bear in mind that we are observed and watched and cared for. So I know the radiation component is an unanswered question, but please don't go with the hype about radiation. Make your plans. Not a good idea to be next door to a nuclear power plant, but make your plans. Buy your potassium iodide, buy lots of it for the after time, and above all, please learn to watch for the signs. Learn waking dreams. Learn that the environment, everything that happens to you and I mean everything. Everything you can imagine that happens to you is a potential message to you from your higher self about life, your life. Now, I know this is outside most of modern man and his and his culture. The Aboriginal, the Native people understand what I'm saying, but the white guys don't. So I'm telling you now that your environment will tell you where to go and what to avoid. So that's waking dreams, and that is my conclusion on these states. Thanks very much for watching.